Thank you for joining us. We're here in the studio today to talk to Walter and Sonika Fajt. Welcome, Walter and Sonika.
Hi.
Thank you.
Walter's one of our main speakers at Amazing Discoveries, and we've been together for quite a long time, 20 years, ever since Amazing Discoveries started. But you've been preaching longer than that, I believe, some 28 years?
28 years, more or less.
And you've preached around the world in many countries. Your Total Onslaught series has been seen by countless people, and we've even had stories of people who've watched the series and just walked into the church ready to be baptized and join the church. And we won't know until heaven exactly what the fruits of your labors will be. But you've had a lot of opposition as well over the years from many areas, many people who have come into your life. And our viewers have seen your life story. They've heard it, probably most of them, but just for those who haven't, we're going to start at the beginning and we're going to hear exactly how God has led you through your lives. You must have fascinating lives to have been able to persevere in over all this time preaching the three angels message. So Walter, why don't you tell us first about your family and your childhood?
Family and childhood. Well, I grew up in a home where my father was Roman Catholic and my mother was Protestant. And my father at one stage, according to my sister, I was too young, but according to my sister, my father was going to go into the priesthood. But he met my mother and that changed his point of view. And so he dispensed with that. But the only problem was that she was Protestant.
She was Lutheran, right?
Yes, she was a Lutheran, and she belonged to the German Lutheran Church in South Africa. And she was one of twins. And when they got married, my mother desperately wanted a double wedding because her sister was also getting married. The only problem was they were Protestants and my father was Catholic. So in order to do the right thing, my father married my mother in the Catholic Church and then went from the Catholic Church directly to the Lutheran Church for the double wedding, to participate in that. Now in those days, that was before Vatican II, so that was a no-no in Roman Catholic circles, and I don't know exactly what happened, but he never ever attended Mass again after that. Although he regularly went to church, and I went to church, and I was raised Catholic, but he never ever attended Mass again. So there was some altercation. And the next thing that happened that is important is that when I was about 8 years old, my mother contracted cancer. And they weren't so good with their treatments in those days. And so she had many operations. They had a mastectomy and then a colonoscopy. They took the colon out. She just deteriorated, but over a long period of time. She had radiation. They even forgot her in the radiation chamber, and she was terribly burnt, and so tremendous suffering over many years. They gave her only a few months, but she stretched it to 4 years. Now, I was attending the German school in South Africa at that stage. I don't even know whether I should mention which school it was, but that's history. And there I had instructions during the religious instruction period with the Roman Catholics. So the Roman Catholics went to one room, but the bulk of the church was Protestant Lutheran. And so we had totally separate instructions.
The bulk of the school was actually Protestant?
The bulk of the school was Lutheran, yes. And of course, there you are subjected to all the doctrines that are associated with this. And this particular nun that was giving us the religious instruction, she was very adamant that because of my mother being a Protestant and she being sick, she probably was concerned and in her special way wanted to influence me, to influence my mother to become a Roman Catholic, because outside of Roman Catholicism there was no salvation, and therefore she taught me that my mother was going to go to hell. At one stage I even had a little bottle of water from Lourdes, which she gave me because this has healing abilities according to them, and I was to somehow pour this on my mother. And I still remember thinking, how am I going to pour this on my mother without her noticing it? And so I sort of opened this bottle, I don't know how old I was, maybe 9, and went to her and talked to her and leaned over her and spilt it on her. And she said, what the heck's going on here? And, oh, sorry. But it didn't do anything. It certainly didn't help. But as time went by, I got more and more agitated, because why should she go to hell just on the basis of being a Protestant? She was a very God-fearing woman. She believed in God. She would recite the Psalms. She prayed. And there was never any religious argument in our home. My father tolerated her Protestantism. She tolerated his Catholicism. I don't know whether they knew the details of what each one was believing, but there was never any religious argument. But this issue just kept growing. And finally I got very angry with the nun, and I got very angry with God. And occasionally the nun would come to our house and go and visit my mother, who was bedridden at that stage. And every time my mother would end up in tears, because she was working at her, she had to become Roman Catholic and she didn't want to give up her faith. And at one stage my father actually found out about this, that my mother was so upset, and so he escorted the nun out of the house most unceremoniously, to my great delight. But anyway, that's history. One day I was sitting in religious instruction, and she was again telling me that it's so unfortunate that my mother was going to go to hell. And I lost my temper, and I took the catechism book and I tore it up, which is a very sacrilegious thing to do. And I threw it at her and explained to her in my 10-year-old language at that stage, or whatever it was, what she could do with her God. Oh, that created a major furor. I was thrown out of the religious instruction class.
Which I'm sure you didn't mind.
No, I didn't mind. But I was very rebellious by now. And then I sat there in the corner, in a sort of a courtyard, an amphitheater with a school, and the walkway of the school was right past that amphitheater. So any teacher or anyone who goes by will see me sitting out there. And the headmaster, he used to come by, and then he'd see me there, and he'd call me and say, "What are you doing out here?" And I would say, "That explicit woman threw me out." At which point then he would proceed to modify my posterior, take me into corporal punishment was of course part of it in those days. So you would get 6 of the best or 3 of the best, and the maximum that you were allowed to get was 6 of the best. And I don't know, but maximum seemed to be the appropriate punishment for me every time.
The norm.
The norm. And obviously they discussed me in the tea room as being this impossible child. And so some of the other teachers had the same attitude. And I remember one teacher in particular, he would, before he even started his class, if class would sit, and he would say, "Fajt, come here," and he'd give me a crack in the face, hit me across the face, said, "Get out, I don't need your kind in my class, go and sit outside." And invariably the headmaster would catch me.
And give you more.
And give me more. And I hated him. And I started to hate school. I wouldn't study. Because after all, when you're a kid, who are you studying for? Not for yourself, right? You're studying for these teachers and to please them. And so I became very rebellious. I remember one time the headmaster, very angry, was furious. And he gave me the 6 of the best, and then he wanted to give me the 7th one, just as an extra bonus. And I refused to cry. I just bent over, grit my teeth. And then I'd say to him, 1 more please, 1 more. And he'd get very angry. And I'd say to him, please, 1 more. And then he'd stop, and I'd say, that's a pity, because if I had 7 strokes, I could go to the police and show them my 7 strokes. And you would be in trouble because you can only give me 6. But you're a coward, you don't give me 7. And so, I wasn't popular at school, not at all. Eventually what happened, my mother died, and then my father, not long thereafter, married another lady who turned out to be a fairy tale stepmother.
She didn't like you.
No, she didn't like me, but I don't blame her. I mean, I was an impossible child by then. And I hated school with a passion. I would dream at night how to destroy schools and how to liquidate teachers. But fortunately, I never got round to that. But I did have my revenge on certain schools, any school.
I think you did.
I think I did, yes. I used to make huge catapults from trees and put stones on them and shoot them into the air onto the roofs of these schools and break the tiles and do stuff like that. And I once manufactured a bomb. It was quite an experience. I had to go from chemist to chemist and buy all the different components, and they would ask me, why do you want sulfur? No, my mother needs it for the roses, or something like that. And why do you need this, and why do you need that? And then I manufacture this thing. And I still manufactured in an old baking soda can, because my father was a baker. I manufactured, it was about that big, and I dug this huge hole under a tree on a school ground and put it underneath, and then set my fuse and went running. And I didn't expect it to be such a huge explosion. I thought it would just be an interesting pop. But the whole tree, which was a huge tree, blew out of the ground and ended up on the sports field. Now, fortunately, when this thing went off, nobody saw me. Everybody went running to see what was happening. And I figured out, if I run away, I'll be in trouble, so I'll run there. So I ran like crazy. It was one of the first there. I said, what happened here? What happened? And everybody was looking around. Nobody knew what had happened. So that was my schooling. So then when my father remarried, it was time for me to go to the boarding school. I had to leave home because this impossible child had to get some training in school. So I went to the boarding school, which was even more of a nightmare, because now I was in the boarding school at this very school that freaked me out. And so eventually I couldn't handle it anymore, so I used to run away, and I used to run into the mountain.
Was this the school where you sat in the trees and threw pine cones?
Yes, it was right up against the mountain, and there was a forest behind it. These days the forests are all gone. I don't know what happened to the forests, but those were all massive pine forests on the slopes of Signal Hill and Table Mountain. They were all forested. And then they would have search parties and come and look for me, and I would climb into those trees. And when they saw me, I would grab the pine cones and pelt the teachers. And so finally they decided I was not schooling material. I had to go and learn some trade or something like that.
Was it your uncle who helped you out?
My uncle helped me out then, because when they said I have to go away from school, then of course my rebellious nature decided the opposite. Whatever they said, if they say A, I say B. Now my uncle was a headmaster at another school, and so I went to him and asked him, can I come to your school? And he said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. But he took pity on me and he arranged for another school. And so I attended that school, which was an upper class English school. The teachers were fine, but I decided I'm going to be a model student. I'm not going to cause any trouble. I'm definitely not going to blow holes in this school because I'm here now because I want to be here. And you have to stand in rows in those days and go in, and this one kid, he just kept badgering me, and he'd walk past me and ram me with his shoulders against the wall, and he'd call me a Nazi and a German and a this and a that. And I took it for about 3 months, which is a world record. And one day he came past again, and I wasn't prepared for it. Normally I was prepared, you know, and you're waiting for it and you can see it coming and you're all right. He bashes you and you go up against the wall, but you're
brace
prepared.
yourself, yeah.
But I was talking to someone and I didn't notice, and he came and he rammed me against the wall, and I hurt myself, and it was time for action. So I grabbed the poor boy, dragged him into the classroom, opened the desk, put his head inside and closed it unceremoniously. And his nose was somehow out of joint. It sort of stood sideways. I broke the poor kid's nose. And so I thought, oh, I'm out of here. I'm out of school. I've lost it. The headmaster called us in. And he was actually a very wise man. He was called the boss. So children had respect for him. And he got the whole story, and eventually he told the poor kid that he'd had enough punishment. He will have to go and see to his nose, but he has to stand outside and wait so that he could hear what my punishment would be. And I thought, well, what's going to happen now? So he said to me, I should really expel you because I don't take lightly when people fight in my school and do this sort of thing. But I will give you one more chance. You will get caning. So he went to his cupboard, and he was a perfectionist, but he had a whole cupboard full of different canes. So he took out a rather broad one and bent it. He used a psychological warfare. And he bent it and he put it back and he took another one, and about the fourth one it was very flexible and just perfect. And by this time the kid, of course, was sweating, right? So he bent it like this. And then he came up to me, and I was sitting on this side of his desk and his desk was on the other side and his chair was there. And as he walked up to the desk, he went like this. And then he whacked the back of his chair 6 times. And then he said to me, whispered, when you go outside, hold on to your posterior. And he gave me a little lecture about how he thought that, you know, the months of badgering that I had was enough punishment for me too. But for the sake of the fellow listening outside, this was a necessary procedure. So I went outside holding my posterior, pulling my face, which satisfied the other party. And that was the end of it. So that actually gave me respect for teachers and schools again. They weren't so bad after all, at least some of them. And that was my schooling. Then I went, after school, I went to the army. And after the military training, I decided I needed to go to university. But I didn't have any money, and my stepmother wasn't in favor of any further studies. After all, I was a troublesome kid, so I decided I'll go by myself. And so I attended university and worked in the evenings and worked on weekends and got a job as a waiter and tried to pay my schooling, and it worked. But I got a little help from a relative here and a relative there. And eventually, when things started to get really better at university, then my father would secretly help me as well. So that helped. And there at the university I had a roommate, and he became one of my best friends. And we studied together and did things together. And sometimes I couldn't find a job over a vacation period. And where was I going to go in that vacation? I had no place to stay. I couldn't go home. I wasn't welcome with my stepmother. And so I used to go home with him sometimes. And that's where I met his sister.
Which is?
Who was sitting right next to me.
Yes.
And having realized that she would make a much better roommate than him, I kicked him out and married her, and that's how we are together. So that was my background. Because of all the religious turmoil, I decided God is for the birds. I don't need God. And at university I studied zoology, evolution. So I became an atheist and an evolutionist, and that was my religion. And if somebody should talk to God about me, that was it. That was the end of the conversation. But I think you should say something.
Now we need to hear from Sonika and see how she grew up.
Well, I had a very different upbringing. My grandmother was very religious, but my parents were total atheists. And so much so that my father actually went into the occult and he tried to understand the mysterious other world, that you know, the supernatural world. And he went into so many different things, Scientology, and he did, I don't know how many, 300 or something seances. And we were sort of drawn into it, but somehow I was never actually interested. I never wanted to explore that world. And so my father used to say, I can remember so clearly, on Sundays the churchgoers would walk past the house and they would walk with their Bible under their arm, and he would say, don't ever go to a church. They'll just indoctrinate you, they'll brainwash you, it's all rubbish. And this somehow, I started to think about, you know, what is there in a church that you know, is so forbidden, you know. And I used to go from one church to the next when they weren't there, and we grew up on our own because my parents were both working. So during the day I was totally alone, and my brother was there, but I was more in the streets than in our home. I was walking the streets all the time. And so I used to go and try and go to one church. There was what was a Dopper Reform church? Of Reform, Dutch Reform? Dutch Reform, but the Reformed Dutch Reform. Yeah. And I used to try and get in there, and it was all locked. And then I'd go to the next church, a Baptist church. I couldn't see inside. I was so curious to know what is inside a church. Why wasn't I allowed to go there? And it was strange. I was never able to get into a church. And then my brother had a defect, kind of a, you know, he wasn't actually born with it, but at 3 years he started to go lame on the one side. And they did many operations, and so he was very insecure, and he was almost like he was trying to take everything out on me, and I had so much trouble, you know, at home alone with him. So I used to just run away from home. And then one day I found this little church. There was a tiny little chapel, and I went in there, and it was open. And I went inside, and it was just quiet, and I sat there and I started singing. And it was so beautiful. I just enjoyed the acoustic and the sound, and I started singing. And that's where I actually started enjoying music and religious music. I didn't know God. I didn't know anything about the Bible. Nothing, knew nothing. And
but you were drawn to these churches.
I was drawn to it, yes, for some reason. And yeah, in the meantime, things were happening in our home, and we always had, you know, it was almost natural that there were always ghosts or, you know, things happening in the house. The sticks would rattle. My grandfather had walking sticks, and my mother kept them in the house after he died, and these things would rattle, and she would just say, "Oh, grandfather's here," you know, or yeah, we would have an easy chair, a nice chair where my grandfather used to sit sometimes, and after his death, this chair would sort of, you could actually see it moving, and you could hear somebody breathing. And I didn't see it as scary, it was normal. That was the way we were brought up. Yeah, and then at one stage, because of, you know, this conflict that I had, my brother was intimidating me, and I was becoming more and more, you know, introverted. I had a speech problem, I couldn't speak. And my father sent me to Scientology, you know, instead of, you know, trying to find out what the problem is, he said, oh, Scientology will sort you out, you know. And I was 12 years old, and he sent me to this organization. I had to take buses and go all the way into Durban. We lived in Durban, on the east coast of South Africa. And this was the most scary thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. They put you have to go through certain levels, and you have to pass the first level and pass the second level, and I think the third level, and then you sort of can go up to the very advanced level. And you have to pass the first three before you can go through the others.
But how do they pass? Don't they
yes.
give you some e-meter?
You get, like, it's like little cans that you hold, and there's wires attached to them, and it's attached to a meter, and they call it an e-meter. And it's basically, I think it's just a lie detector. It's basically what it is. So when the person sits there on the other side of the table with this meter, and you sit on this side, and then they start asking you questions, and they ask you personal questions, and really things that you don't feel comfortable with. And I don't know why, really don't know why they did that, but you have to then get over this. And then this e-meter would register whether you are lying or not, or whether there's something in you that has to be cleared, a karma or whatever. And it was, to me, I was so scared, because they were reading my thoughts. That's what I thought. At 12 years, I thought this meter could read my mind. And I just refused to work with them. And then eventually they phoned my father, and they said they can't do anything with me. And then my father said, well, just put her through to the top level. And at the top level, they had steps, 10 steps that you have to go through. And what I got out of it as a 12-year-old, I didn't understand too much, but I realized that if you reach the top step, you actually become God. And then you can do anything. Then you don't have to be scared of anything. You can conquer everything, your fears, everything. And so I can't remember actually if I went up there, but I just knew that I wasn't interested. And it didn't help me in any case with my speech problem, because I couldn't speak. When we met, he had to speak for me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't get any words out. I was totally dumbstruck. And he had to do all my speaking for me.
She could talk to me, no problem.
But not to anyone else. Anyway, so I went through life that way. Yeah, and that was my childhood, basically.
And then did you go to school, university?
I went to university. When I left school, I went to Stellenbosch University, where he was, and that's where I actually met him before that, but that's where we started to date, basically, and got married in my second year. And yeah, it was quite an experience, because I came from this very different background, and he was this bold, forceful German, and I felt very intimidated by his family, because they were also very German and very bold.
My stepmother was very kind to you, wasn't she?
Yes, his stepmother was quite something else, because told me he doesn't want to take me to his parents because he's scared that she would make me, feel bad. And I said, oh, it couldn't be that bad. And so the first meeting we had with her, the very minute I walked into the home, she said to me, oh, so you are the one who's going to, I'm not going to say all the details that she said, but she said basically you're the one who's going to marry him, and then you're going to inherit everything that actually belongs to me. And you're just a slut, you're just a bad person. And I started crying, and I really didn't.
Very intimidating.
It was very intimidating.
Yes.
So, yeah, we didn't go there often, and we just started on our own. We just carried on.
So you were both non-Christians?
Non-Christian.
You both started your married life, and then you had some children?
Well, before that, I got my first university teaching post. I got it in Durban, and I was in Stellenbosch in the south, or we were, because that's where she went to university. We got married in our second year, and so what now? I've got a teaching post in Durban. So we decided that we would do that, and then she would try and study further at Natal University. And so we moved to Natal, and that's about almost 2,000 kilometers away from where we were. But they wouldn't allow her to do a final year in another university. She had to have at least 2 years in a university to get a degree. So we had to defer that until a later stage. But an interesting story is we moved into a house, and my father actually was secretly helping us because she bowled my father over. He took one look at her and decided, I don't care what opposition I get. And
he liked her.
He liked her. He liked her. Anyway, so he helped us a little bit, and we moved into this house. Now, her father, remember, was occultist, and he was, at one stage, he was investigating for a newspaper. He had incredible experiences. I mean, horrendous experiences, occult experiences. And initially, he wouldn't believe it. Like a little newborn baby, the people would put it to bed, and then the baby would scream like crazy. And then the baby, when they come in, was not in the little bed anymore, but on top of a cupboard. And as they come into the cupboard, the baby starts falling down from the cupboard, and they run and they catch the baby. And he thought there was some hocus pocus there, so he came to investigate, and he sealed all the windows, put seals on them, locked the door, put his cameras up, whatever, for the newspaper. And then the baby would scream. And he would unlock the door and go in, and lo and behold, the baby was on top of the cupboard. I mean, really strange occurrences. Or they'd put a little girl to sleep, another house. She didn't want to sleep. What was the shoes that came walking in?
Slippers, I think. Slippers.
And the slippers would come walking in by themselves. And all of these occurrences. And in one seance, the spirit was talking, and he thought there's a hidden microphone here somewhere. And so he was looking around for the microphone, and the spirit said, there's an unbeliever here. If you don't stop with your unbelief, you will have to face the consequences. So he was even more interested, where is it? And he was looking at, and the next minute, something grabbed him and dragged him outside the building and gave him a blow on the head that he had a huge welt on the top of his head. Now, if something grabs you and throws you out and gives you a whack, then
you start thinking.
Your unbelief in a hidden microphone sort of evaporates, right? So that's how he was drawn into occultism. And he actually started the New Age movement in South Africa. He was one of the first. Now, unfortunately, your mom and your dad separated. And he married again, and he married a high occult lady who was a medium and was very steeped into this and used to have audiences with spirit beings. So that's their background. So while we were living there in Durban, it was only 1 year that I was there. Then I got a job at Stellenbosch University, which I had to take because then she could finish her degree, right? While we were living there in that house, we had such horrible experiences, it's unbelievable. We would lie in bed, and what would happen?
Oh yes, we would hear in the kitchen. We'd done all the dishes and it was in the dish rack, and we'd hear all the dishes fall down. And we had a Rottweiler, a nice big dog, and she would run and go and check it out, and there would be nothing. And this happened a couple of times, and we once had a group of people that came for dinner, and my brother was there, and he said, "What's going on in your house? The glasses are jumping off the table onto my foot." And things like that, and we got a little bit more scared. He was petrified because yes, because
right.
he hadn't grown up with this, and I was more used to it. But the strangest things, we had one accident after the other, bashed the car, and things happen.
But strange things. I'd drive into the driveway and stop my car in the garage, and we're still both in the car when the next moment the whole car lifts up and smashes against the wall, sideways. It was unbelievable.
Just many things, yeah. We would brake behind a car, and the car wouldn't stop, and we'd just go into the car.
So did these demons follow you to your new house from your parents' house?
Well, we didn't know what it was. In Africa, there's a lot of voodoo, and so people were saying that somebody had cursed us or cursed our house or whatever. We didn't know what it was, and we actually asked my father to come and, so we told my father, and he said, "Oh, no problem, I'll sort it out." So he brought his garlic and his garlic, and I can't remember what else was it.
Some signs and...
Oh, signs, yes. He made some signs. I'm not going to repeat the signs that he made in the corners of the house. And he said, "Did you have an argument with your gardener or someone?" And we said, "No." And he said, "Well, maybe they just, cursed you or something." There is, of course, it is very often that they would make a little doll of you, and they would stick needles in it and bury it somewhere in your garden.
Oh.
And that's what he said would probably happened. And so we weren't sure. We didn't know about demons. We didn't know about the spirit world or anything like that.
You thought it was just normal?
She thought it was normal. I thought it was scary.
Mm.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, we would hear these things crashing in the house, like plates flying against the wall, breaking. And the dog used to sleep on a mat next to us, and she'd go ballistic. And she'd go running and coming back and lying down, nothing there. And every time these things happen, I sit upright, my hair starts tingling, but she's just fine. It used to irritate me. And then what happened, it got so bad that it was almost unbearable to live in the house. We'd sort of sneak into the house. We were scared to go into the house. And she still had some of her things in boxes, because we didn't know exactly how long we were going to be there. And she had a black stuffed cat, right? Who made that?
My great aunt. She made dolls and puppets and stuffed animals.
She had given this to her, and these things were in sealed boxes up in the top cupboards. And one night we'd visited her parents, and we come back in and we sneak into this house and we go to bed, and I open my bed, and here is the black stuffed cat on my bed, on my side, under the blanket.
Scary.
That's very scary, because how did it get there? There's nobody in the house. Couldn't have been anyone. It was locked. It was in a sealed box. The box wasn't open. How did the cat get there? And
a black cat.
And a black cat at that. And this totally freaked me out. And I couldn't handle it. And I said to her, we need help. And your father's hocus pocus is not working. And all his occult connections, they're not doing anything. And you know what? The Jesuits say, give me a child until he is 8th year, and I have him forever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm an atheist and an evolutionist. But I say to her, you know what? Maybe the Catholic Church can help. Because, you know, they have exorcists and all of this stuff. I'm going to look for the Catholic Church. So off I go, and I go there. Where was it? In Kloof or where? Yeah, I went to the Catholic Church there, met the Catholic priest and said to him, we have this problem. And he said, no problem, I'll come to your house. So he came to our house, and he had his little book there, and he was reading the exorcist prayers, and he had some holy water, and he did basically what her father did. He went to each corner and he sprinkled the holy water, and off he went. And he said he thinks the problem is solved. And that night, we're lying in bed, and it's dead quiet. Nothing happening. Now, very apprehensive. Looking around, nothing. Deadly silence in the house. And we had a long passage and a door that was open to the bedroom, because we were the only two in the house. Why lock it? And the next minute, heavy footsteps come down the passage. And I'm sitting there, my hair's going...
And the dog.
And the dog goes berserk.
She runs towards the door, and she's barking and barking at the passage. And then she stopped, and she just looked, and she turned around, she came back.
And then the steps came up to the door, but there was nothing there. And then 3 hard knocks against an open door that we could see because it opened into, and it just went, bah, bah, bah. And then that was it. It never came back to the house. So it's almost as if some spirit entity was saying, okay, you got me.
Goodbye.
I'm out of here. Goodbye. I just wanted to know it was me. And then I got this other job. I was only there for a year. And we left.
Just before we left, everything went wrong between my mother and my father, and she tried to commit suicide. And it was also an absolute nightmare. We had to race her to hospital. And the first hospital wouldn't take her because it was a suicide case. And the next one, we had to drive, 30, 40 kilometers at high speed. And we just saved her life.
And you were expecting?
I was 8 months pregnant, and I nearly lost that, or nearly went into labor. So that was very stressful to be there, and we were very relieved to go back to Stellenbosch, away from that place.
Anyway, so then we got back to Stellenbosch, and I got my new position, and my university career was launched, and the first child was born, and the next one, but our children are quite far apart. They're almost 4 years apart. And then finally the third one. So we had quite a number of years of normal settled life. She had finished her degree. She was doing fine. And
so everything had normalized.
Everything's normalized. And then the final event. Our youngest child.
But first, my father separated from my mother. They got divorced, and he came to live with us. And he lived with us for almost 3 years. And then this started happening.
So the same things that happened in the other place started happening in our house. Now, not to the extent that things were flying around, but much more serious. It was as if she was under constant attack. And so she had tremendous problems. She got very, very sick. She ended up in hospital many times. They wanted to terminate the pregnancy. And we refused to terminate the pregnancy, especially after they did a scan and you can see the little fetus developing there. So we didn't want to terminate the pregnancy. And it was touch and go whether she would live or whether she wouldn't live. And she coughed, and she coughed, and she coughed for 9 months. And then when the little one was born, he was a very miserable little fellow. He used to scream and scream and scream, and we didn't know how to handle this. So you remember what you did? You used to rock him.
Yes. You could not, he wouldn't stop screaming, so you couldn't even feed him without movement. So you had to constantly push the stroller, and you couldn't do anything without keeping him happy, and he was just screaming constantly.
Eventually we got him so far that he would, if he fell asleep, he'd be in his own little room next to us, right next to us. And then one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I had a terrible nightmare that I was being strangled. And we had a digital clock on our bed, and it said 2 o'clock. And I sat up in bed and I was perspiring, and it was very realistic. It was horrible, like somebody was killing you. And the next minute, this little child screams like you cannot believe. And we both jumped out of bed, ran, picked him up, and he gets fever cramps. And he virtually stops breathing. So we're stressed like crazy. We rush him off to hospital, and they battled to save him. And eventually he got such high fevers, they put him into sort of a refrigerated cot with cold air blowing upon him, and they put the intravenous fluids into him, and then he'd recover. And he'd come back home 2 or 3 weeks later, exactly 2 o'clock at night, same dream. And then he would scream. And the same drama all over again. Back to hospital, fighting for his life. It was a total nightmare. And one after the other.
It happened frequently.
Yes. How many
For
times?
how
I don't
long?
know.
Many times.
Many times. His folder must have been like this at the hospital. Now, you know what? Kids get sick. Kids get fevers. But exactly 2 o'clock at night, repetitively, over and over and over again, if it happens once, twice, 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, then it's no longer chance. Then it's something else. And every time it's a life and death struggle. We were total wrecks. We were totally finished. And I still remember I was marking scripts. It had just happened again, and he was in hospital. And we took turns sitting in hospital through the night. And I was sitting there, and I was petrified of 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock was a no-no for me. And I was marking scripts from the medical students in the middle of the night. These poor kids, I don't know whether I was compos mentis, but I was marking them. And 2 o'clock was coming, and I'm sitting in the hospital opposite this little cot with this little kid in it. And it's 2 o'clock, and I'm marking. And when the clock struck 2 o'clock, the child started screaming in that bed and getting like fever cramps. And I ran to fetch the medical staff. And now we're trying to stabilize him and to get more intravenous fluid into him. But he's in such cramps. at that stage, they couldn't find the veins in the arms anymore, so they put the intravenous into a vein on the head. And somehow he ripped it, and he ripped it out sideways. Now, a head wound bleeds terribly. It made it even worse. There was blood all over. I was splattered with blood, and they're trying to do this. And then the horrible 2 o'clock goes past, and he relaxes again, and they get it all together again. But that night I decided, I need help. This is beyond natural. And I remembered what happened in our house.
From the priest.
From the priest. I thought, maybe the Catholic priest can help me. And so I waited until she came, and she came at about 6 o'clock to relieve me. And I went to look for the Roman Catholic Church. And I found it. And I got there at about 7 o'clock in the morning. And I asked where the priest is, and I found the priest. Now, I'm not saying this to be a derogatory, it just happened to be like that. But he was sitting that early in the morning with a brandy bottle in front of him, and he was drinking. I don't know whether he was, alcoholic or whatever. But I looked at him and I thought, what am I going to do now? And he sort of looked at me and says, yes, what do you want? And I said to him, I'm a Roman Catholic, but I don't attend church or anything, but I really need some help. And he says, what kind of help do you need? And I said, well, there are very strange things happening in my house. And he says, stop. That's not my field. And I said, good grief, not your field. What's this? You're a priest. This should be your field. He says, no, I'm not interested. Give me your number. I'll get a specialist to contact you. So he gave me his phone number, or I gave him my phone number, and I went home. And then we were together, and I still said, well, that was useless. And the next minute we get a phone call, and it's the chief exorcist of the church from the cathedral in Cape Town. Important man. And he says he's in the area, he's at a particular monastery. Can we come and see him? So I said, okay, and I went alone. I went to him. And he's sitting there opposite the desk, and I'm talking to him, and I say to him, we have a serious problem at home, and I was wondering whether you could help me. And before I can tell him what the problem is, he says to me, yes, I know. The devil is trying to kill your youngest son. Well, you could have knocked me over with a feather, right? How did he know? I said, well, how do you know? He says, no, I just know. In fact, I've known for a week. I said, excuse me, that's not possible. I only just went to the priest this morning. That's not possible. He says, oh yes, we know. And then he said, and your case is very serious. It's a very serious problem. We cannot do a normal exorcism in your house. We have to do a mass in your house. And for that we need permission from the bishop. So I said, well, how long will that take? He says, well, normally it takes a while, but I already have it. And he showed me a letter.
This must have impressed you very much.
I was dumbstruck. This was unbelievable. And I said to him, I don't come to church anymore. I haven't been to church in years, and my wife is not even a Catholic. She's Dutch Reformed, but she doesn't go to church either. And he says, well, that can change. He was very calm about it. And then he came to the house, and he met my wife now. What impression did you have of him?
He seemed very dignified, very, very calm. And at that stage I was doing pottery. I was teaching pottery at the college, and yes, I I thought constantly, I was thinking, you know, we can't take this, what he's doing for us, for nothing. We're going to have to give him something for it. But so he started taking out salt. He had holy salt, is that what you call it? And I had to get water, and he was sprinkling the salt in the water in a form of a cross, in the shape of a cross. And then he would put little salt crosses on the windows. And it was strange to me, but, well, I just accepted it. And then you can tell further when he got to the child's room.
He got to the child's room, and as he was doing his thing with the water there in the child's room, putting his crosses there, suddenly something grabbed him. Mm. And he was shaking, and like something was shaking him like a rag doll. And he wasn't a young man, he must have been in his 70s. And I thought, this man's going to get injured. And I tried to hold him and help him. And he carried on with whatever, and he was being thrown around, and eventually things stopped. And he went to the main bedroom, and he put his signs up there, and a little bit of activity, not as bad, and the other children. And then when he had done that, he took out some amulets, which he said were from Lourdes. And he said, each child must get one of these above his bed. So we put one above each bed on the window, on the picture frame or whatever, hung one there. And then he said, but this child's room, that's the worst. We'll have to say the Mass in this room. So he took off a ring which had a relic of a saint, because every Mass has to have a relic. And he put it on the little table that we put down for him. And he prepared everything to say a Mass in there. And we were standing there, and the next minute there's a patter, and our dogs and our cat, we had 2 dogs, Rudy and I had 2 big Rottweilers, and a cat come running down the passage, sit round the table. Mm-hmm.
Very strange.
Very weird, very weird. And he said the Mass, and then he took off his ordination cross, took it right off his neck, and he gave it to us and said, hang this above the child's bed as well, which we did. And then he left, and you still gave him your pot.
Yes, I had made my best pot, and I thought this is the only way we can give him something, you know, for his trouble. And he said, I will take this pot and I will put it in I'll give it to the nuns in the convent that never see the outside world. And that was strange, because I'd never heard of that, but yes.
So off he went. And from that moment, problem gone, solved. Now, this is strike 2. Mm-hmm. Rome had solved my problem in the first house. Rome had solved my problem in the second house. And I'm an atheist and an unbeliever.
What do you do about that?
Well, I thought to myself, I'm a hypocrite. I'm a hypocrite. And so I discussed it with my wife. And how old was Martin then?
Must have been about 12.
Yeah, so the oldest child was about 12 or 11 by then. And I thought, well, this isn't good opportunity. If someone sees me in church, because I'm this macho atheist, if someone sees me in church, I can say, I'm here to introduce my children. And so we decided I'd go back to church. And she wanted to be a Catholic too, and wanted to join the Roman Catholic Church. And so I started going to church and became a very staunch Roman Catholic. Did everything that a good Catholic does, goes to confession, goes to Mass. Every Sunday I was in Mass. And she wanted to join the church. She came with us to the church. She thought it strange and mystical and all of these things. But they'd solved the problem, right? And so we were regularly going back to church. And then what happened, with this peace in the home, this quiet, you get energy. And there were some things in our house that were irritating me. And being German, I looked at all of the structures that were in my way. There was a wall. I always had to walk around the wall. And I said, you know, this wall really has to go. Because then we have a nice open plan. And this kitchen is pathetic. And so I took a nice big sledgehammer and sorted out the house. And started remodeling the inside. But we needed a new kitchen. My poor wife, I demolished the kitchen. So she had to cook on a...
In the garage.
In the garage.
On a gas cooker. For months and months.
So I found a guy who was going to do the kitchen. And I found a German carpenter. I wanted it precise. And so he arrived. And as he arrived with this new kitchen to put in the new kitchen cupboards, he said to me, I just want you to know that I walk with the Lord. And I looked at him and immediately those old feelings, this is a Christian freak here in front of me, a Jesus freak. And I said to him, well, that's fine, you walk with the Lord, but as for me, I just want a cupboard, okay? That's actually before I went to church, before I started going back to the Catholic Church. I was not yet in the Catholic Church. This was just a little while after the peace came into the house. And so he said to me, well, can I give you this? And he gave me something, and it looked very religious, and normally I'd throw it in the waste paper basket, but I threw it into a drawer, and there it lay. And now these consciences started talking to us, and I started going back to the church. So now, a year later, I've been now in the church for, I don't know, 9 months maybe. I'm lecturing, and I'm lecturing to the first year medical students. And I'm explaining the morphology of the kidney. And as is my custom, I explain the whole evolution of the kidney. And I'm writing on the board and showing where it developed and how it developed. And this young girl in the class puts up her hand and says, excuse me, Dr. Fajt, I don't believe what you are saying. Now, that's like a hornet. Mm-hmm. I turned around and I said, what do you mean you don't believe what I'm saying? She says, I don't believe in evolution. I believe God created it. That was it. I ridiculed her in front of that class. How you can be such an idiot, so moronic as to not believe in evolution. I mean, evolution was a fact. There's no way you were going to get around it. And in fact, I'd even asked the Catholic priest, I'm an evolutionist. How's this going to pan out? You know, if I come back to church, you said, evolution's a fact, no problem. So I ridiculed this girl, and she sat down and cried. So I thought to myself, job well done. The rest of the students loved it, laughed about it, and thought she was a silly girl to make such a stupid comment. And I go back to my office, and I'm doing whatever I do in my office, and that little voice starts talking to me and says, you're a real member of the family Sudidai, to which the pigs belong. How can you be so mean to this poor woman? I mean, she says she believes in God, and you go to church, you're a real hypocrite. So my conscience started worrying me. So what does a good Catholic do when his conscience worries him?
Go to church?
No, he doesn't go to church. He goes to confession. Goes to confession. I had to get it off my chest. So I thought, okay, it was just before lunchtime, and I'd finished my class, and I was going home to take a bite to eat. I thought, I'll go past the Catholic church, get this off my chest, done deal, then I feel better. So I get there to the church, and I find the nun, and I say, where's the priest? And she says, no, he's out shopping. But he shouldn't be long. And I thought to myself, inconvenient. I don't have much time. I have lectures in the afternoon. I still want to grab a bite of eat. I just want to get this off my chest. Where's the priest? No priest. So she says, wait in the church so long. So I'm sitting there in the church and I'm waiting for the priest, and the priest is not arriving. And I see the little red light burning over there, and that little red light tells you that the consecrated host is in there. That means that the Corpus Christi, the body of Christ, is in that tabernacle. So now I'm talking to God. I'm agitated. I'm talking to God. And I suddenly realize, but I'm talking to a corpse, a corpus. That's why I can't talk to him directly. He's there, the consecrated host, but I have to wait for the priest. I can't get rid of my problem. I can't talk to God. And I'm thinking about all of this, and I'm thinking about the ritual. We go to church, the bell rings, you bow down, the bell rings, you stand up, the priest says, and peace be with you, and the congregation says, and with you, and you know, everything is a ritual. And when you say a penance, it's 10 Hail Marys, 1 Our Father, 10 Hail Marys, 1 Our Father. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of conversation is that with God? It's the same thing over and over. Doesn't he get bored with it? And eventually I get so agitated, and this priest is not arriving, and I'm thinking about all this religion, and I'm thinking, you know what? This is a load of rubbish. This is a load of rubbish. There's no communication with God. I have to wait for the priest, and he's shopping. I'm done with religion. I'm going back to my normal atheism and be my normal obnoxious self. Off I go home. And it was lunchtime, and then I had to go back to university, and I was looking for something, but I can't remember what it was. You can't remember, but you knew exactly where it was, what I was looking for. She always knows where everything is. She said to me, go and look in that drawer, it's somewhere in there. I can't remember what it was. But I opened the drawer, and what is in this drawer but this pamphlet? So I whip out this pamphlet, and I think, where's this come from? Ah, yes, that Jesus freak carpenter gave it to me. And I open it up for the first time to read it, and it says, the Roman Catholic Church changed the commandments of God. That's all it says. And then it had 3 sets of commandments. You open up the pamphlet, 3 sets of commandments. The commandments as they are in the Lutheran Catechism, the commandments as they are in the Bible, and the commandments as they are in the Roman Catholic Catechism. And I'm reading, scanning this, and I say, this can't be right. Nobody can just change commandments, and this is what the Bible says, but now I don't believe the pamphlet. What proof have they got that it's different? So I grabbed the catechism, because we had that, because our kids went to catechism. So I grabbed the catechism and I open it up, and sure enough, it's exactly like it's on the pamphlet. Now I need a Bible. But we don't have a Bible. Catholics don't need Bibles. They have catechisms. So I asked her, have we got a Bible? Didn't have a Bible, right? No, we didn't have a Bible. And I'm thinking, where am I going to get a Bible now quickly? I don't have much time. I need a Bible, and I need it, what I always say, right now. I read it right now. And I remember this old lady who was paraplegic, and we occasionally used to go and fetch her at the home and take her home so that she could just get out of this paraplegic home. And she couldn't speak, and we took her for drives and took care of her occasionally, because we were good people, if you know what I mean. Never murdered anyone, never did this or that, took care of little old people like that. And when she died, she left her entire fortune to me, which happened to be 1 box full of old German magazines like Puta and stuff like that. That was it. And what was I going to do with a little old lady's box? Throw it away? I didn't have the conscience to throw it away, because that was her life, and she'd left it to me. And I didn't know what to do with the box, so I put it on a top shelf in the garage. So it struck me. little old ladies might have Bibles. So I went to that box and I rummaged through it, and sure enough, here was a battered old German Bible. And I looked it up, and the commandments had changed. They were different. They were exactly like on the pamphlet, different from the Catholic version, and different from the Protestant version. And I couldn't understand this. So I thought, well, the carpenter must be able to explain it. So I phoned him. And I said to him, you gave me a pamphlet. I want to know what's going on here. Can you come and explain it? Can I come to you? He said, no, I'll come to you. I said, okay, I'm back from university then this evening. So that evening he arrived. And we went right through the book of Daniel.
Right through the night till...
Right through the night.
About till 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Yeah. And then right through the book of Revelation. And here it was. And I said, well, this is incredible. And we did Daniel 7 and the little horn power. And here the Bible teaches that the little horn power is Catholicism, who would change God's law. And here that changed God's law. And all the other features that apply only to Catholicism. Now, this can't be. This must be written after the fact. And so he said, no, the Bible is written so many hundreds years, and this is 6th century before all these things happened. I wouldn't believe it. So I went to the theology department of my university, and I played squash with a professor of Greek. And I played squash with him regularly, and I went and asked him, and I said, what's the stuff here? And he confirmed basically what this carpenter was saying. And I said, I want to get into your library. I want to confirm whether this history is correct. Is this really a fact? And we went through it, and sure enough, it was a fact. And so we got back together and again, and I said to him, but you know, the 4th commandment, that doesn't make any sense. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath. Because it says you must keep the Sabbath because in 6 days the Lord created the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything that's in it. I said, that's ridiculous.
You didn't believe in creation.
No, what nonsense is this? 6 days creation. There's no such thing. It's millions of years. He says, no, 6 days. I said, you're crazy. And then he came with a pile of books, right? He must have gotten them from the college, so he brought this pile of books, creationist books. So I'm reading these creationist books, and I've never read so much rubbish in all my life, from my perspective now. Give them back to him. I said to him, this is a load of rubbish. He says, no, it's not. So he comes back with another pile of books. And I'm going through those books, and I give them back to him, and we get into an argument. Now, good grief. I'm the scientist. I'm the evolutionist. I have a PhD. He's a carpenter. What does he know about evolution? And so finally, he got angry with me, and he said to me, you know what? I don't have a problem with evolution. You have a problem with evolution. You solve it. So I had no argument against him anymore, because basically he capitulated, right?
It was up to you now.
It was up to me. So I'm going back to the university, and now I'm beginning to take out evolution books and starting to think about evolution. And I take out a book on paleontology. And as I take it out of the library, my colleague sees me with this book. And he says, oh, we've ordered the latest version of that book. It has arrived, but it's still in boxes. Let's go and see. Our department had its own library. So went back, opened the boxes, found the new edition. And for some reason, I took them both. And I went to my office, and I started reading them together. Opened them on the same page, because I thought, well, let's see what's different between the old edition and the new edition. What's the newest information? Is there something added or whatever? Now I'm reading them together. And the old one says, when it comes to whatever animal group, the cetaceans or whatever, there are no intermediary fossils. Everything is based on the mindset and the theory. No intermediary fossils. No lineages between any of them. The new one says, this is the ancestor, and that's the ancestor, and this is the ancestor, but they don't fit onto the lines. So these are conjectures, but the old one is honest, whereas the new one covers it in scientific jargon. Now, this makes me just a little bit suspicious. So I go through the entire book like this. When the professor comes in and he says to me, there's been a change in procedure, you will take the next evolution discussion class. Now that was a nightmare, because the postgraduate students, they had a weekly discussion group on evolution issues, and all the staff was present, and everybody, and the students, and the honor students, and the master students, and the PhD students. And I used to do this regularly. When it was my turn, I would take some topic in evolution, whether it was tachytele or bradytele, fast evolution, slow evolution, whatever. I would, present these facts, and we'd have a discussion about it, and it was great. But now, there was something cooking in me. And at that stage I was doing the genetics course, again with the medical students. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do something different. And I started making a list of questions based on the genetics course that I was giving, not out of any book or anything, just questions, as to how something could evolve, or how gene systems could evolve if natural selection doesn't work on the level of the genotype, but just on the phenotype. Then pure chance has to bring about the genetic development. And what are the probabilities of these things happening? So I started making a list of questions. What's the probability of this happening, that happening? I had about 10 questions. That's it. It was only questions. And I gave this evolution discussion class, and I said, today we're going to do something different. We're going to look at it from another perspective, a counter perspective, and ask some questions. And I started putting them on the board. And as I put them on the board, now remember, nobody knows what's going on in my mind. As far as my students are concerned, as far as the staff is concerned, I'm an evolutionist, right? I've got all these questions. And this young girl gets up, and she's an honor student. That means she's a first-year postgraduate. And she looks at the staff, and she points at them like this, and she said, when I came to this university, I was a Christian girl, and I was happy in my religion. And now I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God, and I've become an evolutionist. But as far as I can see from what is written on the board there, I've been deceived. Evolution is not possible. And pandemonium. The one staff member got so angry he went red, he literally started foaming at the mouth. And he screamed at me. And that was the end of that. So just 10 little questions, and I'd blown my career, my university career. So I went home, and I thought about it. And at that stage I had Bible studies already. And we had Bible studies on death and the state of the dead and what spirits were, and that it cannot be the ghosts of deceased individuals. And we'd been through all of that. Oh yes, and these people that had come to give Bible studies, what happened to Robert? Do you remember? As we were starting the Bible studies.
Oh, yes.
You wouldn't tell that story.
Yeah. Yes, when we started, every time we picked up the Bible, he would scream. He would start screaming. He was only about 2 years old then. And he would start screaming and cause some trouble. At one stage we were sitting in our lunch hour. He'd come home and we'd sit with the Bible. We were so eager and so hungry for understanding what the Bible is saying. And we had wine every night. So we still had a bottle of wine, an empty bottle of wine standing there, wine bottle. And he suddenly just got angry or frustrated with us maybe. and he smashed the bottle on the ground, and he walked over it. So he nearly cut his whole toe off. And so then again, we couldn't study our Bible again, and he had to go to the doctor again. And so constantly, as we were trying to understand what the Bible was saying, there was this constant opposition. He was restless at that stage.
And then one night at 2 o'clock, I had the dream again.
Uh-oh.
And he screamed. And we ran there and we thought, is this all going to start all over again? And instead of calling the Catholic priest, because I now had a Bible study on this issue, I called the carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
And the carpenter came, and he brought a pastor from the church, and he came, and we prayed. We prayed about it. Nothing hocus pocus, no water, no spraying, no nothing. We just prayed about it. And it calmed back down. And then when I was deciding, this can't be right, I'm battling with evolution, creation, this, that, same thing would happen. Not as bad that he had to go to hospital, but eventually we decided we'd make a decision. But on the point of decision, the phone rings. I ran down the passage and I picked up the phone, and who is it? The exorcist of the Roman Catholic Church. And I say to him, hello? And he says, you better get back to the Roman Catholic Church immediately. So I said, well, how do you know that I'm not even there? He says, I know. Now remember what he knew before?
Yeah.
And then he says, and by the way, your father, who was dead by then, is suffering in purgatory because of you. Now, of course, I knew that my father wasn't suffering in purgatory because the Bible knows nothing about purgatory. And the Bible says the dead know nothing, and they'll have nothing to do under the sun. But I was curious, so I said to him, how do you know that my father is suffering in purgatory? And he said, because the nuns told him. I said, well, what nuns told you? No, the ones who don't see the world. The one where the pot was, that my wife had made. And I said, well, how do they know? And he said, the spirits told them. So I knew that they were holding seances, just like her father held seances, where the spirit world would talk. And the spirits, of course, are not deceased human beings. The spirits are, what does the Bible say? They are spirits of
demons.
Demons that go out to deceive the entire world. So that is how he knew.
That's interesting. So the demons that were terrorizing your home are the same demons that were talking to the nuns.
The same demons.
And yet the Catholics supposedly exorcised
now
them out of your
why
house.
did the problem stop in my home?
Yeah.
Now, either the Catholic Church had the power to stop it, or they were being duped too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Satan thought that if I can get these people who are so evolutionary and all of this back into the church, I can use them even better as out there as atheists.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this happened, and he just says, stand back. But one interesting thing is, if we take old pictures of this little child, his eyes, before and after we accepted biblical truth, different child.
Really?
Gentle eyes thereafter, and harsh eyes before. We can take pictures of myself. One of my friends picked up, who was it?
Francois.
Francois picked up a picture. Oh, is this your husband? And so this solved this problem to me as to how he knew what was going on in my home. And to be fair, when I discovered what the Bible said on the little horn, I wanted to be fair to them. So I actually invited the Roman Catholic priest to come to our house. And when he came to our house, I said to him, right, here's what the Bible teaches on the little horn power and the change of the commandments and the time period. And I gave him a history of all of that. And I said, now, what is your counter-argument? And he looked at us and he said,
I'm not into scripture.
I'm not into scripture.
What?
And I said to him, excuse me, you're a priest. How can you not be into scripture? He says, we have specialists for that. So I said, well, thank you very much. And he left. And then I called a Methodist pastor. And he came with his elders to our house. And I said to him, now what is your position on Daniel chapter 7? Who's the Antichrist? And he said, Antiochus Epiphanes IV, a Greek king. So now, remember I'd gone to our library and I'd studied the history and I'd seen all of this stuff and said to him, excuse me, you can't be right. So I went through the Bible study and showed that the Antichrist comes out of the fourth beast and not out of the third, so he cannot be Antiochus Epiphanes. It has to be Roman, it can't be Greek. And eventually he got so frustrated, and one of his elders or deacons or whatever that he brought along became so interested, and he was sitting like this and he was saying, that's interesting and that's interesting. So he got up, this Methodist pastor, and he closed the ears of his, whoever it was that was with him, and marched him out of my house. So I'd given the Protestants a chance to explain their modern ideas. I've given the Roman Catholic a chance. And both of them fell short of the biblical criteria. So I decided that this must be the truth. I was at work, and my secretary gives me a document. Now, my secretary, I'd never discussed anything with her. She had no idea what was going on in my house or what was going on in my mind. She gives me a document, this thick, here. And I take this document and I say, what is this? She says, you must read this. So I'm reading it. And it's a document on the Sabbath and why Sunday is the real day to keep. But I was busy with evolution books at that stage, so I didn't have time for this document, so I gave it to my wife. And what did you do with it?
Well, I was very interested in anything now, because now we were studying so hard. We were studying through the night sometimes. And so I was studying with my Bible and this document, and I was going through it. And it struck me that everything that they had to support the Sunday keeping was from Bishop so-and-so and Father so-and-so. And I was wondering, but where does it come? It doesn't come from the Bible. So I was searching in the Bible to try and find evidence, for the Sunday. And every time I opened the Bible, literally every time I just opened it, there were literally hundreds of or tens of texts that came out about the Sabbath and how important it is to keep the Sabbath. And then I realized, and the Ten Commandments, it just came out all the time. And I realized, but they're not basing the Sunday on the Bible. And it made me think, and then I thought, well, I'm going to accept the Sabbath.
So the document that was against the Sabbath?
Yes.
Made you accept the Sabbath?
Yes.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And then she says to me, the Sabbath is right. I'm going to keep the Sabbath. Because the Bible says the Sabbath, and this document
didn't prove anything.
Doesn't prove anything except what Bishop so-and-so said. In any case, the Bible says that you must listen to the word and not to what what the people say. But I wasn't ready to accept the Sabbath, so she was ahead of me. And so now she wanted to go to the Adventist church. But me, I was still a little bit reticent, right? So one day, now people won't believe this, but it really happened. We're going to Helderberg, which is the big church.
An Adventist church.
Adventist church, yes. And this carpenter with his wife and his kids, and me and her with our kids, we go to the church. But I don't really want to go to church. I'm not quite there yet. She's now read this document and she wants to keep the Sabbath. And I'm thinking still, I have an evolution question or two here. I can't keep a Sabbath for millions of years. Doesn't make any sense. It's ludicrous.
And for you it was very important because the Sabbath was a memorial of creation.
That's right.
And you had those linked, and you wouldn't accept the Sabbath if you didn't accept creation.
Cannot accept the Sabbath if you don't accept creation. If you accept creation, then you are the pariah of the scientific world. You'll be ridiculed, right? And who wants to be ridiculed in the scientific world unless it's really important? So they're saying, all right, we're going to church, and they're all getting ready, and the kids are restless, and they're not used to this sort of thing. So I said, you go, I'll take care of all the kids, then you can go peacefully to church. So off they went to church. And I'm sitting with all these kids in their house, waiting for church to come. Do you know how long these people go to church? These Adventists, they drive you nuts. They're in church forever. I mean, I went to the Catholic church, 20 minutes,
It's
done
over.
deal. Go home, drink your beer, whatever. What's this nonsense? Hours and hours in church. Then there's Sabbath school, and then there's this, and then there's lesson study, and then there's a sermon, and it's a day. It's gone. So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting, and I'm actually reading the Bible. And I'm reading the book of Job. And that's not a good book to read when you are beginning to question things in your mind. And I'm slightly irritated because it's taking so long. And I'm reading the book of Job. And here it says in the book of Job, and God said to the devil, I give you permission to touch Job, but you may not take his life. And so the devil touched Job, and Job broke out in sores. Here was miserable Job covered in sores. And I look at this and I say, this is a lot of trouble. This is ridiculous. This is a fairy tale. One doesn't get sores from some devil touching you. A sore is a bacterial infection. It's a, it's a toxic outburst, whatever, or a staphylococcus, but definitely not some demon touching you and then you're full of sores. This is ludicrous. This is ridiculous. So I take the Bible and I'm actually angry and I throw it down there. I'm agitated. Why are they taking so long? What takes so long in that church? I take this Bible again and I read some more in Job, and the more I read, the more irritated I get, and the more agitated. And eventually, I take this Bible and I throw it down and play with the kids or something, but it drags me back. So I pick up this Bible again, and it's a stupid thing, and eventually I decide, as in the Catholic Church, this is for the birds. This is ridiculous. This is so unscientific. It's pathetic. And I'm not going to be duped into believing some stupid fairy tale and then keeping Sabbath for some 6-day creation when this is all full of nonsense. And these people are not coming out of church, and I want to go home now, and I'm almost ready to come and drag her out of church. And while I'm thinking about this, I'm aware that I'm experiencing pain. And I can't figure out what's going on. There's a burning pain on my left leg over here. Just right there. And as I'm reading and arguing and whatever in my mind, the pain becomes unbearable. It's like somebody burnt you with a hot iron. And I'm thinking, what is this? Now, I can't pull my pants up because it won't go up to there. And I can't pull it down because I've got kids in front of me, their kids, other people's kids. So I run to the bathroom, the washroom you call it, right? To rip this pants down to see what's going on with my leg. And here is a massive sore on my leg. It's not broken, but it's blood red. It looks like, I don't know what does it look like?
It's red and slightly knobbly.
Knobbly.
Yes, little bumps.
And it's like it's on fire and the water is just running out of it. now I'm oozing out of it. Now I'm in pain. And I'm really struggling with this. And it takes, I don't know how long until they finally come out of that church. And I grab the kids and I grab her and I said, we're out of here. And we're in that car and we're going home. And I get home and I show her this thing. And I say, what is that? What do you say?
I've never seen anything like it. That's what I said. I've never seen anything like it. It's not broken. The skin's not broken. But it's oozing some liquid.
And it's so sore I cannot even move. And I'm saying to myself, no, there's something seriously wrong here. So I'm thinking, okay, there's nothing that I know that's like that. And I mean, I teach medical students. I've never seen anything like that. I don't know about anything like this. This is definitely weird. And it came instantly. So this is not some infection that developed over time. And I'm saying, okay, I'm willing to accept it. I'm willing to accept it. Maybe some devil touched Job. Maybe it's not so ridiculous. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm willing to accept it. So please forgive me that I thought that. Gone.
Just like that.
Just like that. Gone. And I'm thinking to myself, this is very weird. And then I say to you, you know what?
We've gone crazy.
We've gone nuts. We've gone totally nuts. This is psychosomatic. This is idiocy. I think away from religion, it's nothing but trouble. We'll can this we'll put it on ice. She's Sabbath. She's now hooked on Bible, this, that. We're out of here. No more religion. Go back to our normal life. It was peaceful. None of this drama. Back to normal. And as for this Bible, and as for Job, let's forget it. I don't believe it. Next second, there it is.
It comes back.
And it stayed for a whole week. I couldn't move, I couldn't walk, and eventually I said, I capitulate. And then it went.
Well, unfortunately, Walter, we'll have to leave your story hanging right there. We have to take a break, and we invite you to join us again next time to hear the continuation of Walter and Sonika's life as we find out how God has led them through their years.